My wife cheated with her boss while I worked shifts to pay her debt, so I filed divorce quietly and let the truth destroy them. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and for most of my marriage, I believed love meant carrying more weight so the person you loved could finally breathe. When I met my wife, she was already drowning, credit cards maxed out, old personal loans, interest piling on interest. She cried the first night she told me, sitting on the edge of our couch, twisting her hands and saying, "I messed up before you. I'm so embarrassed." I remember pulling her close and telling her, "We'll handle it together." At the time, that promise felt noble. So I did what I thought a good husband was supposed to do. I picked up extra night shifts, then weekends, then both. My life became fluorescent lights, vending machine dinners, and driving home while the sun came up. I told myself the exhaustion was temporary, that marriage was permanent. Every payment I made felt like another brick in the future we were building. She noticed, at least, that's what I thought. She'd kiss my cheek when I left for work and say things like, "I don't know what I'd do without you," or, "You're so steady. You're the reliable one." Those words mattered to me more than sleep. They convinced me that sacrifice was proof of love, that I was doing something right. Around that time, she started talking more about her job. About her boss. She'd say his name casually, like he was just part of the office background noise. "He's really supportive," she'd mention. "He believes in my potential." I didn't think much of it. Successful, confident, well-dressed, just a boss doing boss things. I trusted her completely. I truly believed that if you stayed loyal, if you worked hard enough, if you kept choosing your partner every day, nothing could touch your marriage. I didn't realize yet that while I was breaking myself to keep us afloat, something else was quietly shifting beneath the surface, and I was the last person who saw it coming. The more I worked, the less present I felt in my own life, like I was slowly fading into the background of a story I thought I was the main character in. My days blurred together, sleep for a few hours, drag myself into another shift, come home sore and quiet. Most nights, I ate alone at the kitchen counter, the hum of the fridge louder than my thoughts. She'd text me things like, "Sorry, long day," or, "Running late, don't wait up," and I told myself that was normal, that careers demanded sacrifice too. When we did talk, everything felt rushed. She'd scroll on her phone while I spoke, nodding without really hearing me. If I mentioned how tired I was, she'd sigh and say, "This phase won't last forever." And I clung to that word, phase, like it was a promise. She started dressing differently for work too, more polished, more deliberate. When I joked about it, she smiled and said, "I want to be taken seriously." Her boss came up more often then. "He stayed late to help me prep," she'd say. Or, "He really understands the pressure I'm under." The way she said his name had a softness to it that made my chest tighten, but I swallowed that feeling down. I told myself I was just insecure because I was exhausted. What kind of husband doubts his wife just because she has support at work? Still, little things piled up. Missed calls that went straight to voicemail. Her phone always face down on the table. Laughing at texts she wouldn't explain. One night, I came home early and found her startled, like I'd interrupted something, even though she was alone. "You scared me," she snapped, then immediately apologized and blamed stress. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. I was working myself into the ground to keep us afloat, and admitting something was wrong felt like admitting all that effort might be meaningless. So I kept my head down and worked more, thinking distance was just a side effect of survival. But late at night, lying next to her while she slept turned away from me, I felt a hollow space growing where closeness used to be. And for the first time, a quiet, terrifying thought crept in: what if I wasn't just tired, what if I was being slowly replaced? No matter how many hours I worked, the numbers never made sense. Every month, I'd send off payments, big ones, and still, her debt barely moved. I'd sit at the kitchen table after midnight, receipts spread out, eyes burning, trying to understand how thousands could disappear without leaving a dent. When I asked, gently at first, she'd tense up immediately. "Why are you interrogating me?" she snapped once. "I told you it's complicated." She insisted on handling her finances herself. "I already feel ashamed," she said, tears pooling perfectly in her eyes. "Don't make me feel worse." And just like that, the conversation flipped. I became the bad guy for wanting clarity. I'd apologize, say I trusted her, even though the pit in my stomach kept growing. Trust, I told myself, was part of marriage. I stopped buying things for myself entirely. No new clothes. No dinners out with friends. I skipped dentist appointments, ignored my car making strange noises, told myself everything could wait until after we were stable. When coworkers asked why I was always picking up extra shifts, I joked and said, "Newlywed life." Inside, I felt like I was drowning quietly. Friends noticed before I did. One of them pulled me aside after work and said, "Man, you look wrecked. Is everything okay at home?" I laughed it off, but his words stuck with me. At home, she seemed lighter than ever, energized, motivated, always rushing somewhere. She talked about work with excitement I hadn't heard in years. Meanwhile, I felt like an ATM with a pulse. One night, I accidentally saw a bank notification on her phone. The amount wasn't huge, but the name attached to it wasn't familiar. When I asked, she grabbed the phone instantly. "It's nothing," she said too fast. "Just work stuff." Her voice had an edge to it, sharp enough to cut. I told myself not to push. I told myself love meant patience. But as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, a darker thought settled in: maybe the money wasn't just disappearing. Maybe it was going somewhere she didn't want me to follow. The night everything shifted started like any other, me coming home exhausted, expecting the apartment to be quiet and dark. Instead, the lights were on, and she wasn't there. It was almost midnight. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. Just that familiar knot tightening in my chest. When she finally walked in, nearly an hour later, something about her felt off immediately. She smelled different. Not bad, just unfamiliar. Like a hotel soap or someone else's cologne mixed with her perfume. I asked, "Everything okay?" trying to keep my voice neutral. She froze for half a second before smiling too quickly. "Yeah. Work ran late." She brushed past me, dropping her bag like she couldn't wait to put space between us. I followed her into the kitchen and asked who she'd been with. Her shoulders stiffened. "Why does it matter?" she snapped. That tone, that sharp edge, hit harder than the words themselves. I said I was just checking in, that I'd been worried. She rolled her eyes and said, "God, you're acting insecure. I can't deal with this right now." The room went quiet after that, thick and heavy. As she leaned over the counter, her phone buzzed. I glanced down without thinking and caught the tail end of a message before the screen went dark. I didn't read the words, just saw the name. His name. Her boss. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. She noticed my stare instantly and flipped the phone face down. "Don't," she said, low and warning. I apologized. The word came out automatically, like muscle memory. I told her I was tired, that I didn't mean anything by it. She softened immediately, touching my arm like nothing had happened. "You're just stressed," she said. "Get some sleep." But lying in bed later, listening to her breathe evenly beside me, I couldn't quiet my thoughts. For the first time, I felt it clearly, the sense that I wasn't just imagining things anymore. Something had cracked that night, and no amount of trust could seal it back up. After that night, every instinct I had told me something was wrong, but every time I tried to listen to it, she made me doubt myself. If I asked how her day went, she'd answer vaguely, then accuse me of monitoring her. If I mentioned feeling disconnected, she'd sigh heavily and say, "You're never home anymore." Of course things feel off. Somehow, my long hours, spent paying her debt, became the reason I wasn't allowed to ask questions. She got better at it with time. Better at turning things around. One night I said, quietly, "You don't talk to me the way you used to." She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "That's because you're always tired and grumpy. You make everything about you." I remember standing there, mouth half open, wondering how my concern had turned into a character flaw. Her phone was never out of reach anymore. She took it to the bathroom, to the shower, even to bed. If I so much as glanced in its direction, she'd tense. "Can I have some privacy?" she snapped once, her eyes hard. That word, privacy, was suddenly more important than our marriage. And still, I apologized. Over and over. I started rehearsing conversations in my head and then abandoning them before they ever happened. I told myself not to bring things up, not to upset her, not to be that guy. The silence felt safer than conflict. At least silence didn't end with me feeling small. I began to feel like a guest in my own home, welcome only as long as I didn't ask questions. She still accepted my money without hesitation. Still let me work myself into numbness. But emotionally, she was somewhere else. When I tried to touch her, she pulled away. "I'm exhausted," she said. "Work has been brutal." Meanwhile, she glowed when talking about projects and meetings and him. Late at night, I lay awake replaying everything, wondering when I'd stop trusting myself. I knew something was wrong, but I was too tired, too conditioned, to fight it. And the scariest part was realizing this wasn't confusion anymore. It was control. And I was letting it happen, one apology at a time. The moment that changed everything didn't happen during a fight or a confrontation. It happened quietly, by accident, on a random Tuesday night. I'd come home earlier than usual because a shift got cancelled, and she was in the shower. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, screen lighting up the dark room every few seconds with notifications. I tried not to look. I really did. Then one message popped up and stayed there a second longer than the rest. It wasn't vague. It wasn't professional. It said, "I still feel you on me." And underneath it, his name. Her boss. My chest went cold, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. My hand started shaking so badly I had to grip the counter. Every excuse I'd accepted, every apology I'd made, collapsed at once. This wasn't stress. This wasn't work pressure. This wasn't my imagination. This was an affair, and not an emotional one. This was physical. Real. Ongoing. The shower turned off. I heard the water stop, heard her humming like nothing in the world was wrong. In that moment, something inside me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically. It was quieter than that. Like a switch flipping. I didn't confront her. I didn't grab the phone. I didn't yell. I put the phone exactly where it was and sat down. When she walked out, wrapped in a towel, she smiled at me and said, "You're home early." Her voice was warm, familiar. I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger. No heartbreak. Just clarity. I said, "Yeah." Shift got cancelled. My voice didn't shake. That scared me more than anything else. She went about her night like normal, chatting, scrolling, living in the lie I'd been financing for months. I watched her closely for the first time, not as a husband, but as an observer. Every touch felt staged. Every word felt rehearsed. That night, lying next to her, I didn't sleep. I stared into the dark and made a decision I never thought I'd be capable of. If she thought deception was a game, I was done playing fair. After that night, I stopped reacting and started watching. It was strange how easy it became once I wasn't trying to save anything anymore. I moved through the apartment like normal, went to work, paid bills, nodded at the right moments, but inside, I was detached. Calm. Focused. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was a witness. I noticed patterns immediately. The late, work dinners always fell on the same days. The way she'd shower the second she got home, like she was washing something off herself. The sudden use of perfume before leaving the house, even on days she claimed she'd be staying late at the office. I wrote things down in my phone during breaks at work, not out of obsession, but out of necessity. I needed to know the truth in full. One afternoon, while she was asleep, her phone buzzed beside her. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. The preview alone was enough. Hotel. Tonight. Same initials as before. My heart pounded, but my face stayed still. I felt like I was watching my own life from outside my body. I checked our bank statements next. That's when it really hit me. Charges I didn't recognize. Boutique hotels. Expensive dinners. All clustered around the same dates. Dates I remembered clearly because I'd been working double shifts those nights. I realized then that I wasn't just being betrayed emotionally, I was funding it. Every extra hour I worked had bought them privacy. The affair wasn't new. It wasn't a mistake. It had been going on for months. Maybe longer. And the worst part wasn't the sex or the lies, it was how carefully she'd planned it. How easily she'd looked me in the eyes and called me paranoid. How naturally she'd accepted my money and my apologies. Instead of breaking down, something else took over. A cold, steady resolve. I stopped feeling heartbroken and started feeling awake. She thought she was getting away with it. She had no idea I already knew everything, and that I was quietly deciding what would happen next. The lowest point didn't come with screaming or tears. It came during a night shift that felt endless, under buzzing fluorescent lights that made everything feel unreal. I was stacking boxes, hands aching, feet burning, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A bank alert. Another charge. Same hotel as before. Same night she'd kissed me goodbye and said, "Don't wait up." I leaned against the wall and felt my stomach twist. I did the math in my head without meaning to. How many hours I'd worked to cover that one charge. How many nights I'd missed sleep. How many pieces of myself I'd traded so she could live a double life. I realized, standing there in a warehouse at 3 a.m., that I was actively paying for my own humiliation. I finished the shift on autopilot. Drove home in silence. When I walked into the apartment, she was already asleep, sprawled comfortably in our bed, my bed. Her phone was charging on the nightstand, face down like always. I stood there for a long time, just looking at her, trying to feel something. Anger. Sadness. Anything. Instead, there was this heavy, crushing emptiness. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered her name. She stirred, half awake, and murmured, "Hey, you okay?" The casual concern in her voice almost broke me. I nodded and said, "Yeah. Just tired." That was the truth, but not in the way she thought. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. The mirror showed someone I barely recognized, sunken eyes, slumped shoulders, a man hollowed out by loyalty. I slid down against the door and finally let it hit me. Not loud sobbing. Just silent tears, hot and humiliating. I felt stupid. Used. Replaceable. That was the moment I understood I had reached the bottom. I couldn't save this marriage. I couldn't fix her. And I couldn't keep destroying myself to maintain a lie. Sitting there on the cold tile floor, I knew one thing with absolute clarity: this was the last night I would suffer in silence. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm with a strange sense of calm. Not relief, calm. Like the part of me that had been panicking for months finally accepted the truth and shut up. She was still asleep beside me, breathing evenly, one arm flung across the pillow where my chest used to be. I slipped out of bed without waking her and made coffee in silence, every movement careful, deliberate. At work later that day, instead of picking up an extra shift, I sat in my car during lunch and searched for divorce lawyers. My hands shook a little as I made the call, but my voice stayed steady. When the lawyer asked how long I'd been married, I answered automatically. When she asked why I was calling, there was a pause, then I said, infidelity. Saying it out loud felt surreal, like talking about someone else's life. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends. Not my family. And definitely not her. That secrecy felt powerful in a way I'd never experienced before. For once, something was mine alone. I opened a new bank account and quietly redirected my paycheck. I stopped paying extra toward her debt and only covered what was legally shared. Every small step felt like reclaiming oxygen. At home, I acted normal. Asked about her day. Listened when she talked about work, about him, without flinching. Inside, I was counting down. She mistook my calm for compliance, my silence for ignorance. She had no idea I was already gone in every way that mattered. One evening, she smiled at me over dinner and said, "Things feel better lately, don't they?" I nodded and forced a smile back. "Yeah," I said. And for the first time, it wasn't a lie. Things did feel better, because I had a way out. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't plotting some dramatic confrontation. I just wanted my life back. And as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully beside me, I realized the most dangerous part of my plan was how invisible it was, because she wouldn't see it coming at all. The day I filed for divorce didn't feel dramatic. It felt quiet, almost anticlimactic, which somehow made it more powerful. I took a half-day off work and walked into the lawyer's office alone, the air smelling faintly of coffee and printer ink. I signed the papers slowly, my name steady on every line. When it was done, the lawyer looked at me and said, "Once she's served, things will move quickly." I nodded, feeling nothing but resolve. I didn't confront her. I didn't give speeches or ask for explanations. I waited until a day I knew she'd be at the office late, another team dinner, another lie, and I packed a suitcase. Just the essentials. Clothes. Documents. A few personal items. I looked around the apartment we'd shared and felt no nostalgia, only relief. I left my keys on the counter and walked out without leaving a note. She called that night, confused at first. "Where are you?" Her voice had a nervous edge I'd never heard before. I told her I was staying somewhere else. She laughed uneasily and said, "What do you mean? Are you mad about something?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. 2 days later, she was officially served. Her reaction was explosive. Texts flooded in, angry, panicked, pleading. "How could you do this without talking to me? This is insane. We can fix this." I responded to none of it. Silence, I'd learned, was far more unsettling than confrontation. When she finally showed up where I was staying, eyes red, voice shaking, she demanded an explanation. I looked at her calmly and said, "I know." That was it. No accusations. No evidence. Just those 2 words. Her face drained of color. As she stood there, scrambling for control, I realized something important: I didn't need closure from her. Filing quietly had already given me everything I needed. And as I closed the door behind her, I knew the truth she'd buried so carefully was about to surface on its own. I didn't have to expose anything. That was the strangest part. The truth came out on its own, piece by piece, like rot finally breaking through paint. Once the divorce paperwork was filed, finances were reviewed. Accounts traced. Charges questioned. Things she'd hidden suddenly had names and timestamps attached to them. Hotels. Dinners. Weeknights I'd worked until my legs shook. It was all there, unemotional and undeniable. She tried to get ahead of it. Called me late one night, voice trembling, saying, "You don't understand, he took advantage of me." I listened quietly, the phone warm against my ear, and said nothing. She kept talking, words spilling faster and faster, contradictions piling up. When she finally stopped, I said, "I'm not your husband anymore." Then I hung up. Her boss disappeared from her life almost instantly. Blocked her. Stopped replying. Denied everything at work. I heard through mutual acquaintances that HR got involved, not because I reported anything, but because someone else noticed patterns. Office gossip turned sharp. Support vanished. The man who'd felt so powerful when he was sneaking around suddenly had nothing to gain by standing next to her. She spiraled. Missed work. Missed deadlines. Missed calls. She messaged me paragraphs at a time, apologies, accusations, rewrites of history. You were never there. I felt lonely. I made a mistake, not a choice. I read them all and answered none. The silence did something to her that anger never could. Without me reacting, she had to sit with the consequences alone. Friends stopped inviting her out. Her family asked questions she couldn't dodge. The version of herself she'd been presenting to everyone started collapsing under the weight of facts. I watched all of it from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with a strange sense of finality. This wasn't revenge. It was gravity. Actions falling exactly where they were supposed to. Still, late at night, when everything was quiet, I wondered how it would feel when this chapter finally closed, when there was nothing left to uncover, nothing left to lose. Because even as her world unraveled, I knew the hardest part was still ahead for me, learning who I was without the weight of someone else's lies. Life didn't magically get better the day the divorce was finalized. There was no sudden happiness, no cinematic sense of victory. What there was instead was quiet. Real quiet. The kind that doesn't feel empty, it feels safe. I moved into a small place of my own, sparsely furnished, but every object in it was chosen by me, for me. No shared debts. No shared lies. Just space to breathe. For the first time in years, my paycheck stayed mine. I paid off what was left of our joint obligations and watched my bank account stabilize instead of vanish. I stopped picking up extra shifts and started sleeping through the night. I cooked real meals. I went for walks without checking my phone every 5 minutes. The exhaustion I'd been carrying didn't disappear, it slowly loosened its grip, like a muscle finally unclenching. She tried reaching out one last time after everything was done. A short message. I hope one day you understand. I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. I didn't need to understand her. Understanding had kept me stuck. What I needed was boundaries, and I finally had them. Looking back, the hardest truth to accept wasn't that she cheated. It was that I'd mistaken self-erasure for love. I thought sacrificing myself made me a good husband. In reality, it made me an easy one. That realization hurt more than the betrayal, but it also freed me. Now, when I think about that version of myself, the man working nights to pay someone else's debt, apologizing for asking questions, I don't feel shame. I feel compassion. He did the best he could with what he believed at the time. Walking away quietly wasn't weakness. It was the first decision I ever made that fully protected me. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm not surviving someone else's choices. I'm living my own.